Hi. Um, I am very nervous right now. Just going to come out and say that. Now I'm getting emotional. We can do this. We can get through this. Okay, so why am I making a video like this right now? Well, I wanted to come on here and talk about something. So I, about a week and a half ago, froze my eggs. And the reason I wanted to make a video about that is because sorry, I'm just really nervous right now. I learned a lot in the process, and anytime I talk to somebody about it, they have a ton of questions, and oftentimes people learn things that they didn't know about. And yeah, I just want to come on here and talk about it. I feel like a lot of people post, pregnancy updates and stuff like that, and sometimes people are brave enough to show, to post complications with, their fertility journey and everything, but I don't see a lot of posts about egg freezing. I see some influencers post things, but other than that, just normal day-to-day life, not a lot of people posting on social media that I know of anyway, posting about freezing their eggs. So I wanted to come on here and maybe hopefully answer some questions that you have, or maybe you don't, and just kind of educate both men and women about what the whole egg freezing process is like. So I first wanted to talk about why. So there is a lot of reasons why I decided to do this. In one of my first meetings with my fertility doctor, I told her I wanted to be able to date like a man, and she laughed. But in all seriousness, that is kind of why. I want to, remove the whole biological clock issue from dating and everything. I want a family someday, but I also don't want to feel the pressure of, my aging body and fertility and everything. And it just opens a lot of doors for me, quite frankly. Any relationship that I'm in, I will never feel the pressure I have to make this work because this is my last chance at having a kid or something like that. I have my own control and autonomy the entire time, which is great for me. Also, even if let's say I meet someone tomorrow, which bless, that would be great. But let's say I meet somebody, even if we get married soon, then we could still wait a few years if we wanted to. We won't feel like we need to rush into having kids. And so basically a lot of this for me was just giving myself options, and if I wanted to DIY a kid one day, I could, I could just, it puts the control completely back in my hands, and I don't have to continuously think about I need to hurry up and find somebody because I want a family someday. So that was kind of my why. Yeah, just wanted to say that. Okay. So the first question that a lot of people have is what age you should get this done by. So I first looked into freezing my eggs when I was, it was in January 2021. So not this past January, but the prior one. And I had just turned 30, and I had a meeting with my gynecologist, and I was like, hey, I am in a phase of my life now where it looks like I'm going to be freezing my eggs. What's the ideal age to do that? And so the sweet spot apparently is early 30s. She said, if you can do it before you turn 32, that's ideal. But most people, doctors will recommend by age 35. And that's not to say that you can't get them done after egg freezing, after you turn 35 or anything. But, really the whole answer to that question is the younger, the better. The doctor said if, egg retrieval was free, she would say everybody should do it, when they're 25 or something like that. But it's not free. It actually costs a lot of money. And, if you freeze them when you're 25, there's a very good chance that you're not going to use them. But in your early 30s, you're still considered very young in terms of egg health. But you usually know by then, am I going to have a kid by 35? And if the answer is no, then you might want to consider freezing your eggs. And the reason 35 is such a big deal is because there is a lot of data proven that after 35 is when your egg count really starts to decline. And technically it's declining your entire life. I think we're all anybody with female parts is born with 1 million eggs or something. And then now at 31, I probably have hundreds now or something. But apparently 35, there's like a very clear delineator, like that's when your egg count really starts to decline. But 30, there's also some, she said, there's not enough studies out, but there's some tests that are starting to show that if you do it before you turn 32, the chances of frozen eggs resulting in a viable pregnancy go up, as well as there are some studies to suggest that your egg count also starts to decline after you turn 32. Now, if I just freaked a ton of people out, please don't freak out. Everybody's different. These are all like data points collected, over time and everything. So you could be a 28-year-old with a 40-year-old's eggs, or you could be 40 with a 28-year-old's egg. I mean, that's not really how it works, but these are all averages. So like definitely talk to your doctor about everything. If you get anything out of this video, my biggest piece of advice is you need to go get this thing called an AMH test, which AMH stands for anti-Müllerian hormone. And what that is, so the anti-Müllerian hormone, there's this hormone in your, my dog, hold on, pause. And we're back. Okay, AMH test. So the anti-Müllerian hormone, there's basically this hormone that is produced by the reproductive tissue in your ovaries that basically is a signal of what, how fertile you probably are, or what your egg count probably is. So it's not like a true fertility test, but it gives the doctor an idea of like, hey, are we still making eggs? What level is it between? And all of that. So depending on your age, there's like a certain range they expect your AMH levels to be. And if it's below that range, then that might mean like your ovarian reserve is low. If it's higher than that range, that probably means you have lots of eggs left. So that would be my biggest piece of advice is it's a simple blood test. Go get an AMH test basically, and then you'll like have a better idea of if you would be a good candidate for freezing your eggs. Man, I'm sorry. This whole talking about this is really, really hard for me. I'm really nervous. Okay. So other than age, the other next biggest question is cost. So lots of people will be like, ask me, is it covered by your insurance? That's funny. No. So a lot of bigger tech companies will cover it, and it's kind of like a new thing to start covering. But my company does not, and most insurance companies will only cover IVF if you're having fertility issues. So like if you have a partner and you've been like trying to have, I think you have to try for like a year and a half and like prove it with documentation, or I don't know, like through your doctor and stuff. That's the only way insurance will cover it. But if it's just elective egg freezing, most insurance providers don't cover it. And then your next question might be, Elise, why didn't you switch to one of those companies? I don't really want to job hop right now. The next place I know I want to go, I know they also don't cover it. And if I ever do go to a company that covers it, I'm just going to ask for, like, especially if I'm still making payments on it, then like, I'm just going to ask for a sign-on bonus to cover that, to pay off my payments, so like, it just wasn't a big enough reason for me to job hop. But cost. So if you Google it, most places will say it's between, or like most places on the internet will say it's between 10 and 20,000. And I would say that's fairly accurate. For me, it's probably going to cost, I haven't done the math, but like 15 or 16,000 total. Which you're probably like, oh my God, that's a crap ton of money. Yeah, it is. It's insane. But that is what it is. The way the cost broke down for mine was like the actual surgery by itself was 10,000. The medicine was 3,000. I was quoted up to 5,000 for medicine, but the medicine that you have to take, you have to give yourself a bunch of shots. That was 3,000. And then I had to get like 6 or 7 ultrasounds, and those were $250 each. The initial consultation was $250, and you have to get a ton of blood work. Blood, like, I don't know, the first blood work I had done was, I think, 225. Next one was 140. Next one was 60. And then all of a sudden, subsequent ones were 40. So I'm somewhere in the $15,000 to $16,000 range. You can pay for it out of pocket. I was actually going to do that, and then I bought a house. So I'm like, okay, maybe we're going to finance this. And there are a lot of options for financing. I ended up working with a company called Future Family, and I definitely recommend them because they are a company that specializes in financing these types of things. And they also have like a whole team of nurses that are on staff that basically is your like main go-to person, confidant, like the entire time you're going through the process. So I had a nurse that I was able to text whenever I want to, you know, for whether that be for medicine support or emotional support. The first time I had to give myself shots, it was like a Saturday night, and she hopped on a Zoom call with me and like instructed me through the whole process. So it was really, even though I could ask my doctor and nurses all of this, you know, through normal business hours, it was really nice having like a backup person that I could ask questions to and talk to, you know, this whole time through it. So but yeah, that's the cost. I know other people have done it, paid $16,000. I know another person did it in New York and it was like $18,000 there. Oh, and then I forgot the most important part of the cost. So the actual procedure is probably, like I said, 15, 16, and then it's another $800 per year for every year that your eggs are frozen. So next year, I think mine's like 7 something, but yeah, it's basically $800 a year for every year that you have your eggs frozen. So keep in mind that. I have like a list of everything I want to talk about. I just thought of something. Another thing people ask is like, what happens to your eggs if you die? You actually have to sign this thing that gives you 4 options. One of which is you can destroy them, you can donate them to an egg bank for reproductive purposes, you can donate them to a partner or spouse, or you can donate them to a specific person. So I decided to donate mine to an egg bank because, you know, I don't know, I feel like if people are having fertility issues, it'd be nice if they could use my eggs if I'm not here anymore. So I don't know. But yeah, those are the options for that. Okay. Now I'm going to talk about the process and like what that whole process is like. So I got my first AMH test in January of 2021, and I didn't freeze them back then when I was 30. And then this year, after I turned 31, I knew I wanted to try to do it sometime this year. So, in July is when I first met with my fertility doctor, so not my gynecologist, it's a separate doctor, and she wanted to do the AMH test again, but I had been on birth control, and if you're on hormonal birth control, you have to be off of it for 2 months before you can have that AMH test because it affects your hormones and you could get like a false positive or negative or whatever if you take the test while on hormonal birth control. So I came off of birth control for 2 months, then had the test, and she's like, yep, you're super fertile, got tons of eggs. I'm like, cool. And so we decided to move forward with the process. So after that, they put me on a very specific type of birth control that I think it has like a really high estrogen level or something. Basically, they're trying to control your cycle. So they want, you know, to all of your like follicles to start at the same baseline. And so I was on a different type of birth control for 2 weeks. And then after that is when I started the shots, which I'm going to talk about the shots in a second, but I had to give myself shots for, it was 2 to 3 shots for 8 to 12 days. And then also going to the doctor every other day. So yeah, okay. Now to talk about the shots. So why do you have to give yourself shots? So normally what happens in your cycle is every month your ovaries produce a lot of follicles, and in each of those follicles is one microscopic egg. And of all of those follicles produced, one gets really big and matures basically makes a mature egg, which a mature egg is an egg that's gone through, it's called mitosis. I don't know what this stuff's called, y'all, but makes a mature egg. That egg is released into your fallopian tube, and then the egg's like, yo, sperm, where you at? And then nothing happens usually. And then, you have a period and life goes on. So it's only one mature egg, and a mature egg means it can be fertilized with a sperm. When you're giving yourself these fertility shots, it makes as many mature eggs as possible. So you get your follicles get really, really big, basically. And you have, the idea is you want to try to get as many mature eggs as possible, because those are the only ones that can be frozen, because those are the eggs that can be fertilized. So that's why you have to give yourself shots, is because instead of only making one mature egg, you're trying to make as many of them mature as possible. So now let's talk about the shots process for a second. I don't know how this is legal like that. Because they teach you how to do everything, but when they were first explaining it to me, I'm like, we let like random people in America do this? Like, are we sure? I don't know. I guess I just don't have faith in society, because it's not like the stuff's just preloaded to the exact right amount and you just like stick it in you and go. Like, no, it's a process. Like, there's this one called, one of the medicines called Menopur, and you have a little vial of sodium chloride, which a diluent basically, and then you have like this powder, like the actual medicine, and you take the little vial, clean it with an alcohol swab, put this thing called a Q cap on it, which is this thing that punctures a hole in the top of the vial. You pull out some air into a syringe of exactly 1 milliliter, you attach it, you push the air in, and then because physics, that like sucks up exactly a milliliter of diluent, and then you unscrew that, put that on the powder vial, push the diluent in, mix it all around, pull that in, then you attach a needle, then you do this like flicking thing to make sure the little bubble appears at the top of the needle, and then you inject it. And that's one shot, okay? So the first half of it, I think I was giving myself 2 shots every night, and then the last half of the process, I had to give myself 3 shots every night, which, if you watch those people who are going through IVF and they're like influencers and stuff, it's always their partner giving, the woman the shots. When you're doing this by yourself, you have to give yourself the shots, and I've never given myself a shot before, and that was a wild experience, okay? Now, the needles like aren't that bad. They're, I don't know. Okay, what is this? It's like an inch, and they're really thin. So it's not like vaccine shots where, they're super long needles and it's going up here. Like, they're small, but the whole disconnect of like you having to inflict pain on yourself is honestly the hardest part. And then the other hard part is it's not just about the pain. It's like I keep telling people, you have to keep your wits about you. So the whole process is you load up the shot, right? And then it has to be in your like lower abdomen, like below or around your belly button. And so you grab literally a piece of fat on your stomach, you shove the needle in there. And then you have to push the medicine in, which it's not like it just goes in super easily. Like, there's kind of like a light pressure. So you're just like pushing this like needle into you, right? And so you push all the medicine in, then you have to hold it there for 5 seconds. So you're just like, well, I'm in pain right now, like holding this thing in your stomach. And then you pull it out, and then you get to do it all over again with the second shot, and sometimes a third time, depending on where you are in the whole shots process. And you bruise. I have like 2, they're almost healed. I have, you don't bruise with every shot. It really depends on where you stick it. But there was like, when I gave myself the trigger shot, like, I don't know what I did, but I must have hit a vein or something. There was lots of blood. It was a little gross. Okay. So you give yourself all of these shots 8 to 12 days. And then while that's happening, you also have to go into and see your doctor and get an ultrasound every other day, because they're basically watching to see how your follicles grow. Now, ideally, all of your follicles grow equally. Mine did not. Most people's do not. You can't like really control this. But you want to try to get as big of a cluster and as many within this certain range of size. And then once it gets to that range, you give yourself, it's technically 2 shots, but they call it the trigger shot. And then you have to have surgery within 36 hours of it. So that's like another crazy thing about this whole process is like, in terms of taking off work, I was having to go to the doctor every other day for like a little over a week, right? And it's not like they were all like 7 a.m. appointments. Like, they're just in the middle of the day. And thankfully I have a flexible job that like allows me to do stuff like that. But I'm like, I don't know, back to the whole like privilege to be able to do this whole thing. Like, it's just wild. You have to go into a doctor every other day. And then every day that you go into those doctors, you also have to go get blood work done. So that was really the worst part of this whole process, is just all of the freaking needles you have to inject. Like you're giving yourself shots every other day. You're getting blood drawn, and depending on the nurse you have that day may or may not, hit the vein right, and man, you get bruises. Just so many freaking needles. Okay, that's the hard part. And then you don't know what day you're going to have surgery until 36 hours before the surgery. Like, it's actually wild. I don't know. I don't know. The whole process was just crazy. Yeah. Okay. So that's like everything about shots. Is I don't know how it's legal that they let people do this themselves, because it's not that hard, but I'm me, so I watched videos over and over again and took 4 pages of notes about how to give myself shots. But yeah, you can really F it up, so I don't know. That was just wild that we let people do this to themselves. Okay. Last thing I'm going to talk about. Well, no, I'll get to that in a second. Okay. So, we talked about that. Sorry, I have a list of everything. So Texas, I have a section on Texas. We'll see why. So I had asked a couple questions in my initial consultation that were a little bit more Texas related. So the first thing I asked was, I was like, hey, if I ever move out of the state, or if this state decides to enact any dumb laws that result in me needing to get my eggs out of the state, can I do that? Can I ship my eggs somewhere else? And they said, yes, you can move the eggs to wherever you want to move them. I'm like, great. Okay. So that was question 1. Second question I asked was, okay, let's say I'm 38 or 39 and I have a partner and I want to have a kid. Do I use do I try to get pregnant naturally, or should I use my younger, healthier eggs? And this is the part that kind of frustrated me. So she said, pre-Roe v. Wade being overturned, she would recommend getting pregnant naturally. So now here's the sidebar that I just realized I haven't really talked about yet. After 35 and later, the reason it can be not dangerous, I don't want to freak people out, but basically if you get pregnant at that age or later, it's not saying that this will happen, but there's a higher chance that the eggs that you have could result in chromosomal abnormalities, and you have also a higher chance of a miscarriage and or an ectopic pregnancy. So any kind of things that can go wrong in a pregnancy, the chances of those things happening go up as you age. And so she said, pre-Roe v. Wade being overturned, she said, as long as you're willing to assume those risks, that you have a higher chance of a miscarriage and all of that, she would recommend getting pregnant naturally, because then you're not having to pay for IVF and go through that whole process. But now that Roe v. Wade is being overturned and you can't get abortions, there is a not pretty good, but there is a higher chance now that you could be put in a position where you might either have to fly to another state to get the care that you need, or you have to wait until you get sick enough to get the care that you need in Texas. So it might, even though pregnancies are technically listed as high risk, they're not actually that high risk, and you might choose to go that route because there's less chances of something going wrong. So I thought, I don't know, that was really interesting and just something to consider. Now, just want to touch briefly on what the actual procedure was like for me and everything. So the procedure is relatively invasive in my opinion, but it's not that bad, but the recovery sucked. So I already talked about how you get you have to get ultrasounds, right? So they're transvaginal ultrasounds, which little one, stick it up there, look around, woo, ovaries, cool. The procedure itself is, I wrote this down because I know it, transvaginal ultrasound aspiration. Basically, you're put under, so you're put, I was under anesthesia and everything. So it's the normal ultrasound one, but next to it is a really big needle that has a hole in it. The needle itself has a hole, and it's connected to this, suction machine. And so I put the little ultrasound up there, and the needle, there's a guide, and the needle is right next to it. And so it So it's like, okay, here's the vaginal wall, and then it goes up to the ovaries. That's how women's parts work. I don't know. I go up there, they pierce the vaginal wall with the needle, go up into your ovaries and drain all of the follicles. So each of the follicles has one egg. And so even, even the ones that they know probably aren't going to have mature eggs, they still drain them anyway, just in case. So they drain every single follicle, and then they go poke the other side and do the same thing on the other side with the ovary, in that ovary. So that's how they draw all of the eggs out. And I didn't feel anything when I was in it because I was asleep. And then I woke up and I was in a little bit of pain, but not a lot. And then they took me to the recovery room, and I just kept, like, they made me give them a number on a scale of 1 to 10, like, how much pain am I in? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. I'm at like a 4 or 5. It's not that bad. And then as we kept waiting, I'm like, I'm at like a solid 6, 7. Like, I was like on and off crying. Like, it was really bad. I was like in a ton of pain. And they had fetched 25 eggs, that's a lot of follicles to have. Like, my right ovary alone had 15 follicles, which is much larger than average. So yeah, they're like, I think because we fetched so many, that's probably why you're in a lot of pain, because your ovaries are really mad at you, because you just, we just poked them a ton. And I'm like, great. So I was in a ton of pain. So they ended up taking me back into the like surgery room and like hooking up an IV to my hand and giving me like a ton of like more fentanyl, basically, which, oh my God, that was wild. They're like, this is going to sting. I'm like, okay. And then all of a sudden my arm was on fire, like actual fire. It was wild. I have never experienced anything like that before. I don't know. Lots of firsts for me. I'd never really been put that far under before. Like, it was weird. And then even that, like, they said I was supposed to leave by like 9 a.m. that morning. I didn't leave till 11:15. I could tell they were not expecting me to be in as much pain as I was. It was pretty brutal. Okay, eventually make it home. I have Tylenol 3, which is Tylenol plus codeine that they gave me. And apparently when you take a lot of painkillers, it makes you like really constipated, which I have never had, I've never had constipation issues before, and you're extremely bloated as well. So for, I would say 2 or 3 days, it felt like I had fists in my stomach pushing out. Like, it's not even that I was like, oh, I feel fat. Like, it had nothing to do with vanity. I was just in so much pain. From the constipation and bloating. And they're like, weren't you taking Miralax at least? Yes, I took Miralax. I ate oatmeal. I drank decaf coffee. Okay, like, that helped move things along a little bit, but Jesus, I was in pain. And then that's separate from the pain from the actual surgery. So that was just kind of a constant pain. And then anytime I like sat down or stood up, there was like a deep rooted pain, like way in the lower abdomen. I'm like, and that's the pain from the surgery. I read this thing online. It's like, for some people, like, egg retrieval can cause a lot of pain. And other people, it's virtually pain-free. I'm like, whoever wrote this, no offense, was a man. Like, there's no way, there is no way that this is virtually pain-free for anybody. I think a lot of women's experience, maybe like some of them do have less pain than I did. I had a lot of pain. Anyway, so I got a call, later that day. They were able to freeze, I say 12 and a half eggs. So I told you they fetched 25. I knew, and they knew, like, based on my chart, like, there's definitely not going to be that many mature eggs, but they can only freeze the mature ones because those are the ones that can be fertilized. I have 12 mature eggs that they froze, and then one that was in, like, it's called stage M1, which is like the intermediate process. And they used to not freeze M1s, but lately they've been doing that because there's, studies have started to show, like, if you freeze those and then they survive the thaw or whatever, like, they can still sometimes mature and grow into an M2, and M2s are, mature eggs that can be fertilized. So based on my age and that number of eggs frozen, I have a 75% chance of one viable pregnancy. And you're like, wait, Elise, doesn't that mean you can have 12 kids? No, it does not. So usually when you like hear your follicle count when you're getting all of the vaginal ultrasounds or transvaginal, whatever it's called, like you'll hear numbers like, oh, you have 20 follicles. That does not mean you're going to get 20 eggs frozen. So it's all kind of like a winding down process. So you have X number of follicles, then they freeze X number of eggs. And then once they're frozen, I think the statistic is like 90% survive the thaw. So you might like lose one or two, like when they defrost some eggs. And then when they fertilize them, when they fertilize those eggs, like maybe not all of them are going to turn into embryos. So that's why you, that's basically nothing, it's all imperfect science, and that's why it's all percent chances, of that. The number I was kind of trying to shoot for was that 70% number. If you look at most graphs based on your age and everything, a lot of the things kind of gear towards that 70% number. So in my opinion, 75% is really good in IVF terms. Anybody getting closer to that 80 or 90% is either 25 had like an insane amount of mature eggs because, I don't know, they just got lucky or something, or they did 2 rounds. And you're like, but Elise, it costs $15,000. Wouldn't that mean you would have to pay another $15,000 if you wanted to do a second round? That's exactly what that means. So am I doing a second round? Hell no. I already feel really, really good about my chances. I also know I have high AMH levels, so I think I'm gonna have like a pretty good chance at getting pregnant naturally whenever that day comes. So I feel like pretty good about where I'm at right now. Back to the age thing for a second. So this is also where age comes into play. So having 12 frozen eggs as a 31-year-old is very different than having 12 frozen eggs as a 39-year-old, just as an example. Like, I think the number there is closer to 50% chance of pregnancy. So that's why when you freeze your eggs later in life, it's often recommended to do 2 rounds, because the chance of each of those eggs resulting in a viable pregnancy is lower because you're a bit older. And so, like I said, again, not trying to, worry anybody like, oh, I'm 36, like, is it too late? Like, it's not too late. Like I said, just go get the AMH test and talk to your doctor about it, because that will give you the most information. Okay, so wow, I think that was everything. I did not expect this video to be that long. Everything I've talked about has been all of the reasons I am excited about why I chose to freeze my eggs, but also know that this process was like really hard for me, and it's hard for a lot of people. So, if you're going through this process and you're thinking like, she seemed to have such a positive outlook, like, no, like I left every single doctor's appointment, like, and I just went and cried in my car for a little bit. Like, there's a lot of different reasons that this could be hard for someone to decide to go through. But it is also it's like something I, in some ways, feel like I have to go through, and it's in other ways feel like something I get to go through, right? Like, I do feel lucky that I was able to do this, at this point in my life. I do feel lucky that it's going to give me a lot of options and freedom and peace of mind for my future. And I think that's really great. And yeah, I froze my eggs, and now you all know, and I haven't talked about this on social media at all. So, I don't know. I hope you guys like this video. I feel like maybe I forgot some of the stuff, but I tried to be as comprehensive as possible. Okay. Feel free to leave any questions, either in the comments or DM me or whatever. Okay, that's all. I hope you enjoyed this hopefully informative video. Okay, bye.